the Great Food, Great Stories podcast. I'm Steven Shomler, your host. I am so excited today. I've got a special guest joining me, someone I've been a fan of for quite a while, Jacob Grier. Good morning, Jacob. How are you?
Morning. Great. Thank you.
So I first came in contact, you came into my world because you wrote an awesome, incredible, beautiful book, Cocktails on Tap, The Art of Mixing Spirits and Beer. When did that book come out?
It was March of 2015, so a little over a year ago now.
All right, and I love this book. We need to have you back on the Portland Beer podcast as a guest to talk about this book. I've had the cocktails. I got to go to your event at Powell's when it opened, and then where would you go? Whiskey Library afterwards, is that right?
Yeah, which was a really fun event. It's as you know, it's normally a very somewhat formal bar with a very high level of service where you sit down and we have carts come and make cocktails tableside. And that night we got to kind of cut loose and let people stand up and go all around the bar and get long lines to the bar. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah,
it was great. And then in addition to that, you're part of the team at Wayfinder, which is an awesome brewery that has opened to a lot of acclaim here in Portland. And you're part of the team there. You help make things happen, and you're a bartender there. And I suspect you've got beer cocktails there.
That's why they brought me in. It's a great opportunity when you have a brewery with a full bar to be able to combine the two.
That's awesome. Okay, but the reason we're here today is because last year I attended a really cool event you created that I was excited about, and I thought it would be awesome, and it was even better than I expected. So we're going to talk about Aquavit Week, but a lot of people may not know what Aquavit is. What the heck is Is it Aquavit or Aquavit?
Aquavit, at least in English is how we'd say it. And Aquavit, to put it in the simplest way, is a spirit that usually comes from Scandinavia. That's where its roots are. And it's flavored usually with caraway or sometimes with dill.
Okay, caraway or dill in Scandinavia. So do people drink it straight or do they have cocktails with it?
Traditionally, they would definitely drink it straight. It's meant to be a very social drink. It's meant to be a drink that you would have with food. So if you want to be very traditional about it, you would just pour a little bit in a glass and drink that with your dinner and toast your friends.
So is Aquavit more popular here or in Scandinavia?
You know, that's a funny question to ask because it certainly is a bigger seller in Scandinavia than it is here. But in terms of the trends, I feel like in the United States, interest in Aquavit is really rising, and whereas in Scandinavia, there's some perception of it as maybe just something you would have as a traditional holiday drink or something that your dad or your grandpa drank. And so now they're starting to rediscover interest in it as well.
So Aquavit, at least in Portland, occurs around kind of like Thanksgiving time, and everyone has those dishes at Thanksgiving that they only eat at Thanksgiving, be it that special cranberry salad or that awful green bean casserole that Grandma made that was terrible. And so for some people in Scandinavia, that's what Aquavit is. Have it at the holidays, kind of supposed to, and then that's it.
Yeah, and you break it out during the summer as well. And I don't want to say that's the only time people drink it because obviously they drink it year-round. But it is seen as a very traditional drink. And, you know, if you go to a cocktail bar in Scandinavia, you'll see tequila cocktails and mezcal cocktails and American whiskey drinks. So it's not like they're just putting Aquavit in everything. To them, it's just one thing of many that they have at the bar.
And do they tend to drink it? I know this is a generality, which doesn't always apply, but do they tend to drink it straight or in a cocktail?
Usually straight, although they're discovering ways to mix with it as well. But, you know, one challenge of making cocktails in Scandinavia is they tend to have very high taxes. And so people tend to drink beer more often. And if you're trying to make a fancy cocktail with a unique ingredient, the price goes high really quickly. So when people from Norway or Iceland come to the United States and visit cocktail bars here, they get very excited and see us using things in cocktails that they can't just do on an everyday basis.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, but in America we tend to use Aquavit more in cocktails than we do drink it straight.
Exactly. I mean, we're the birthplace of cocktails in a lot of ways, and when you look at companies that are trying to market spirit to the U.S., they always have to keep that in mind and pretty much think of cocktails first and sipping neat second for most things.
All right. So what kind of flavors will I get when I drink Aquavit?
Well, in the United States, there's really only one rule in the guidelines that the government does for Aquavit, and that's that it's a spirit flavored with caraway. So it's got to have some caraway. That said, beyond that, distillers can have a lot of fun and reach for almost any flavor they like to add to it. So some that you see pretty often are dill, whether it's the seed or the herb. You also see a lot of star anise, some cumin, and then other spices that you might find in like a gin, like a juniper, will show up as well.
And sometimes anise.
And anise is a big one for sure, especially in the U.S.
Yes, I love all those flavors, and it's a different kind of. It's kind of like a lot of people don't know what Aquavit is. I'm big fans of Vin Distilling here in Portland, and they make Baijiu. Baijiu is a drink that a lot of Americans just don't know about, but if you are in Mexico, you're going to drink tequila. If you're in Jamaica, you're going to drink rum. If you're in Russia, you're going to drink vodka. If you're in China, you're going to drink baijiu. It's a spirit that's local to that area. Aquavit's kind of like that. It's a spirit there that not everybody knows about, but hopefully we can spread the word and get more people drinking it.
That's our goal.
All right. So this is a Portland-centric podcast. So what are some places in Portland that people can generally, throughout the year, when it's not Aquavit Week, they can go throughout and find some Aquavit on tap? I guess not on tap, but on the shelf.
On the shelf, yeah. Nobody specializes in Aquavit more than Broder, who has 3 restaurants around Portland. They're a wonderful, loosely Swedish restaurant that has both a lot of Aquavit and Geneva on their cocktail menus. And they now have 3 locations around Portland. And Broder Nord is where we host our events, which is their biggest one.
Okay, any other places that are good for Aquavit around Portland?
Well, there's several of the cocktail bars that have also really embraced Aquavit. So Bit House Saloon, Expatriate, the Whiskey Library where I've worked, Mule in Southeast Portland. These are all places where you could probably go on any given night, ask the bartender for an Aquavit cocktail, and get a really nice surprise.
Now, and I've heard tell that they actually have some of it at Wayfinder.
Yes, and at Wayfinder we do our own secret Aquavit blend.
That's awesome. Okay, and then we have a lot of really, really good distilleries here in the Portland area, Portland and Oregon. We should have you back as a guest sometime. Now, I've got you booked for 3 future shows, so to talk about the distillery scene in Portland. But I'm aware that one of them, I know Andrew at House Spirits, love House Spirits, and they make one Aquavit. So talk to me about how's their Aquavit compared to some of the other ones that are imported?
So House Spirits created Krogstad Aquavit, named after their founder, Christian Krogstad. And they're the ones that I credit with getting me into Aquavit in the first place. And along with a lot of other bartenders, especially in the Northwest, there's a good chance that Krogstad was the first Aquavit they ever tried. And the way they make theirs is it's a mix of caraway and star anise. Now, if you look at a lot of Swedish Aquavits, they tend to incorporate some anisey notes, whether it's from fennel or something similar. But House Spirits really go strong on their star anise, and they make this really beautiful Aquavit called Krogstad, which they do in both the unaged version, which they call Festlig, and the aged version, which they call Gammel. And I think they're wonderful spirits, but they are very anise forward, so they can be a little bit divisive.
Now, can you say those names again?
Oh yeah, Krogstad Festlig, which basically means festive, and Krogstad Gammel, which just means aged.
Now, I'm not sure if you're actually talking about spirits or just talking in Tolkien, so, but it sounds really awesome.
Right. But yeah, so they've sort of shaped a lot of people's perception of Aquavit. And so especially here in the Pacific Northwest, people might think that Aquavit has to be an anise spirit. And they kind of group it in there with, say, absinthe or ouzo or raki or some of these other spirits that really feature licoricey, anisey type flavors, which some people love. I personally love them. I use Krogstad all the time. But there's other people who might not like anise. And if that's the case, I would say, well, maybe you don't drink Krogstad, but here's an Aquavit that's all caraway, or here's one that's almost all dill. So no matter what your tastes are, there's probably an Aquavit out there for you.
So Aquavit is almost in one sense like beer. A couple of years ago, it was very popular to do a high hoppy, bitter IPA. I meet people that tell me, oh, I don't like beer, or I don't like IPA. And if they say they don't like beer, it's like, wait, you don't like IPA? Well, there's a gazillion types of beer. Or there's even the different kinds of IPA. Some have hoppy flavor but no bitterness. So if you've had the anise one and you like it, great. But if that's not your making, you can still have an authentic Aquavit that has different flavor profiles.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also differences in strengths. A lot of the American Aquavits, like we talked about earlier, they make their Aquavit with cocktails in mind. So they want an Aquavit that's big and strong and is going to stand up if you mix with it. Whereas, there's some other, Nordic Aquavits where if you were to buy those, they're much more mild and gentle in flavor, and it's something you might just want to lightly sip on.
Okay, so now tell me about some of your favorite Aquavit cocktails, because you're a bartender. I don't know. I want to say what's the most honoring thing. So if people listen to this podcast, how come he's not a mixologist? Because Jacob prefers a bartender, but he, I would say, is a bartender extraordinaire. He makes amazing cocktails, does a fantastic job. So what's some of your favorite cocktails with Aquavit?
Well, I like to think of it as a way to mix with it that's similar to other spirits that are made in kind of the same way. So if you like a gin cocktail, you could always try it with an Aquavit and see how it turns out. So one of my favorites is what I call a Dill Collins, which when we named it, I wasn't thinking about Phil Collins, but now I can't stop hearing it. But that would just be a traditional Collins cocktail with a dill Aquavit, lemon juice, simple syrup, and soda, so very light, very refreshing. You can also go in kind of a Negroni-ish direction. Negroni would be Campari, sweet vermouth, and gin. You can switch that up and do Aquavit, Campari, and sweet vermouth, and it works really nicely.
So a gin drink I like, and this you may say that's not going to work, which is you won't offend me, but I love a gimlet, old school, gin, and when it's a hot summer day, gin and roses lime juice. Would that work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, you'll see the guys at House Spirits used to make a lot of cocktails like that with their Krogstad.
Oh,
They called it an Aquavit daiquiri, I think, but it's the same idea.
And what's the Phil Collins one?
The Dill Collins.
The Dill Collins. So you mix that up and then you put In the Air Tonight on for the soundtrack.
Exactly, yeah. We can play that now.
That's good. Okay, any other cocktails come to mind that you like?
Well, you can also think of Aquavit and kind of take it in a whiskey direction. So one of the famous ones was created by David Wondrick, who's a cocktail historian, who created an old-fashioned riff that he calls the Old Bay Ridge, which was a neighborhood that had a lot of Scandinavians in New York. And so, traditional old-fashioned would be whiskey, bitters, and sugar on ice. He makes this one where instead of doing all whiskey, he mixes equal parts rye whiskey and barrel-aged aquavit. And it then gets kind of like that rye bread character of the rye and the caraway coming together. So you can do a drink like that. We also did one at the Whiskey Library that one of my coworkers came up with, mixing a very sherry-forward Aberlour Scotch with a little bit of sherry barrel-aged aquavit and nocino and bitters to make a sort of Manhattan-ish winter cocktail.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites that I've gotten to try.
Yeah, Old Fashioned is probably my favorite all-time cocktail. I love an Old Fashioned, so I can get an Old Fashioned version made with aquavit.
Absolutely, yeah, I recommend it.
Oh, that's good. Okay, anything else? Any other different types or styles?
Those are the two big styles I see most often. If you talk about Negroni-ish, whiskey, old-fashioned-ish, and then a sour, those all work really well. Occasionally, you might see a flip. Taking a whole egg and an aquavit and some darker flavors and kind of making a dessert drink could work well too. You could also do a hot toddy.
I was going to ask because winter coming, and I love hot cocktails, so you can do a hot toddy.
Absolutely. Yeah, aquavit hot toddy can be really nice. I actually like it with that the Krogstad Gammel.
Now, I remember from your beer book, I had a beer punch, and you had this whole section on punch, and it's historical, and it's awesome. And so have you ever made an aquavit punch?
Yeah, actually tying this all together, there's actually one recipe in the book called a hot bruin, which is a hot aquavit and beer punch.
All right, we've come full circle. I love it. That's fantastic. And if I haven't mentioned yet, you really should go buy Cocktails on Tap, The Art of Mixing Spirits and Beer. It's a fantastic book, the content, and then it's got absolutely beautiful photos on it. So do yourself a favor. If you don't want to buy it, don't pick it up and look at it, because once you do, you'll be hooked, because you're like, okay, I have to own this book. Okay, so you are the founder of Aquavit Week. Your first one was 2012. What is Aquavit Week?
So it's a chance to promote what I saw, especially in 2012, as an underrated spirit, that there were some very cool distillers making aquavit in the United States and a couple being imported, and they were flying very under the radar. And so you have all these bartenders trying to find new things to work with, and aquavit seemed to be something that people were missing. So we did an event at a bar that I used to work at called Metrovino, which is now closed, where we tried to get every aquavit in the United States and bring it in and then make a cocktail with each one on the menu so that people could try all these different flavors.
That sounds really innovative.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was one of the best events we did there. And then for our third year, we decided to start doing events around town and inviting other bars to participate, kind of on the model of Negroni Week, which is a similar concept where they encourage bars to do a Negroni variation for a week on their menu. We do a similar idea. We encourage bars to put an aquavit drink on their menu for a week so that people could come out and just try new things, and bartenders can get excited about mixing with something that they may not know very well.
And so when I went last year in 2015, that was the 4th annual Aquavit Week. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
And then, so is it generally the same time of year? Is it December? Is that generally when Aquavit Week is?
Yeah, we've always done it the first week of December after Thanksgiving.
Okay, first week in December after Thanksgiving. Okay, and then you have a number, at least in Portland, you have a number of different events. You go to Aquavit Week. There's a website, there's a Facebook page, and there's a Twitter account, and you can find out where the events are. In addition to the specific events, then you might be able to find your favorite bar. Hopefully, we'll be celebrating Aquavit Week by having a cocktail right there.
Exactly, and we've got a page on the site, so you can look up whatever city you're in and find a bar nearby that's hopefully doing a drink for you.
And some of the events are more cocktail specific. Some of them are food and aquavit pairings. So you kind of got a variety depending on what people want.
Exactly, yeah. So we do our opening party at Broder Nord, and that's the most traditional in the Scandinavian sense of pairing aquavit with food. And then we have events at Bit House Saloon and Expatriate, which are a little bit more cocktail focused and taking things in this more contemporary direction of American cocktails.
Yeah, I went to the Broder event last year, and it was phenomenal. It was so much fun. The food was amazing. I got to meet I got to enjoy different cocktails, but then I got to meet producers. So at all your events, you have producers, people that are representing the brand that can talk about it.
Yeah, which is great. I think we have more producers of Aquavit in Portland than in any other city in the United States. We have 3 different distilleries making Aquavit here.
Oh, who are those?
We have Krogstad, who we already mentioned.
Yep.
Also Bull Run.
I like those guys.
Yeah, they make a really wonderful aged Aquavit called a Regnig Dog.
A Regnig Dog?
Yeah, which means a rainy day, which is appropriate for Portland. And then there's Rolling River, which is a really cool distillery in southeast Portland.
And they're newer.
They are the newest of the 3, and Aquavit is their specialty. So for everybody else, Aquavit is one product of many that they make. With Rolling River, they're currently making 6 different Aquavits, plus a couple other spirits. So they're really leaning in and making Aquavit the main thing they do.
Wow, okay. I'm going to have to get them on the Great Food, Great Stories podcast. That sounds awesome. Okay, but then here's something that's really cool. You are growing the Aquavit Week brand. So this year, you are moving to a couple different cities.
Yeah, so last year was our 4th year. And that was the first year that after building this up kind of independently, I was able to get some sponsorship to start expanding. And so we did more events in Portland. We did an event in Seattle. And that's thanks to Linja, which is the most identifiable and biggest Norwegian brand of Aquavit. And they enjoyed last year so much that we decided to go even bigger this year. So now we're doing events not just in Portland, but also in New York City, Chicago, and Houston.
That's awesome. And so I hope that it just keeps growing, and you could spend like the first 4 weeks of December just traveling the country talking about Aquavit. I'm sure you'd find that to be a terrible burden.
I think I'd need a break for January if we did that. But yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
So you've got this year. You did Seattle last year. This year you've got Chicago, Houston, and New York. What are some cities that in the future, who knows, just kind of dreaming big, that you would want to also add an Aquavit weekend?
Well, San Francisco is one that I think would be a great city for it. It's one of the best culinary cities in the United States, one of the best bar cities. The same with LA. Those are 2 places I could always spend more time in.
And how about New Orleans?
I love New Orleans, so I'd love to do it there.
And I'd be willing to go with you if you need help drinking when you're there.
Right.
And then I'll throw just a weird dark horse out of the hat, just because I was just there recently, Shelton Brothers, the festival, Louisville.
Yeah, that could be fun.
Amazing food and a really growing craft beer scene. And I know that it's the home of bourbon, and they may not, but it could be a fun thing.
Yeah. Also, Minneapolis has a large Scandinavian population, so that could be a good place.
I lived there for 3 years. Yeah. You're exactly right. Just stay away from the lutefisk. You don't want that.
And I'd love to go to DC sometime too. We actually talked about DC this year. Because they have all the Nordic embassies in DC, so we could probably do some really cool events there.
Okay, so if you ever do that in the future, I want to somehow go and then just do we can wear tuxedos and go to an embassy and have an Aquavit Week event at an embassy.
Sounds like a great idea.
That would be fantastic. Oh, I love it. All right, so if you are listening to Great Food, Great Stories podcast across the country, just go and check out Aquavit Week. Google it, go to the website, go to the Facebook page, and just find out if it's grown. If this is 2018 or 19 you're listening, has it grown to be in your city? And you should go because I think it's awesome. All right, anything else we should cover about Aquavit Week? Oh, we should drink some of it.
That's the best part.
All right, so what's this first one that I'm going to...
So I brought 2 for us to try today. This first one is one I like to introduce people to Aquavit with. This is Brennivin, a.k.a. the Black Death of Iceland. So if you've ever seen travel shows about Iceland that show people eating fermented shark and washing it down with a shot of liquor, it's this stuff. It's Brennivin.
Why do they call it the Black Death?
Because of the stark black label and because of the face tourists make when they first shoot it back.
Ah.
Yeah, but that's one of the reasons. But yeah, they also have been known to drink too much of it and pass out as well.
Okay, that makes sense. It smells amazing. What am I smelling?
So the reason I like to introduce people to Aquavit with this one is it's 100% caraway. So it's neutral grain spirits. There's no other flavor added except caraway seeds. So if you don't know what caraway tastes like and you want a good baseline to understand Aquavit, this is a great one to go with.
I think it's fantastic. It's just great. So isn't there a caraway sandwich that's native to Buffalo, New York?
Maybe.
I think there is. This would be fantastic with that. This is really, really good.
Yeah, so if you want to try Aquavit for the first time, this one, there's also one called Aalborg, which is very similar with that very strong caraway flavor. Those are 2 great ones to try. I like to put them in the freezer, pull them out nice and cold like this one is. and they're just great to sip on. So this would be a very traditional way to serve it. You might also see these sometimes they'll just freeze the entire bottle into a block of ice and just pour from that.
And then it stays cold the whole time. Yes, beef on Weck. Beef on Weck. Yeah, it's roast beef sandwich on a roll, and the roll is topped with caraway seeds.
All right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you can...
Good find. I'm going to have to look into this.
Aquavit and beef on Weck.
Maybe we could find someplace in Portland to do a beef on Weck sandwich for us.
Oh, that would be fantastic. That would be awesome. I can't imagine people making a bad face when they drink this. This is really good.
I'm glad you like it.
Okay,
it's great in cocktails, too. Like, this is a good one if you wanted to do, say, a Negroni. I've also done, like, 75s with this, like an Icelandic 75, where it'd be this, along with some lemon and simple syrup and some champagne.
Wow. Okay. All right. And what's this next one? This one's a little darker.
So this one's Linja, so very different in style, which is a great way to just see how different aquavits compare to each other. So Linja is our sponsor for the past 2 years. And they are one of the most famous aquavits in the world, one of the most identifiable labels.
And I met some people from Linja last year at Broder.
Yes, yeah, they came all the way from Oslo for our event.
Super nice people, and they've been making aquavit for a long time.
Yes, very long time. This one goes back about 200 years in some ways. So some differences in Norwegian aquavit compared to some other countries. They tend to drink more barrel-aged aquavit, so this one has spent time in barrels, and in a very interesting way, they actually put it in sherry casks. And then they put the sherry cask on a shipping container, and then they put that shipping container on a boat that goes all the way from Norway down to Australia, around the world, and back up. And so this aquavit has actually been aged at sea. And as a result, you get this very sherry barrel forward flavor. It's much softer in its character. And the botanicals are different too. So it has multiple botanicals. So I don't think we know all of them, but there's caraway as the base, but also some orange peel and some aniseed, but in a much lighter way than some other aquavits.
Okay, for those that don't know, what's a botanical?
A spice or an herb that you would add to the still or an infusion afterwards, and so that its flavor would get added to the spirit.
And you can get flavor primarily from botanicals, but it's also sometimes people use it for aroma.
Yeah, flavor and aroma for sure. And one other thing about Norwegian aquavit that makes it unique is to make a Norwegian aquavit, you also have to make it with Norwegian potatoes. So most aquavits that we drink here are grain-based, rye or corn, but the Norwegian aquavit is 90% Norwegian potatoes as its base.
Okay, so I have a friend that is adamant, and I think he's nuts, but that's okay. I can actually tell him, hey, Jacob said you're right, or Jacob said you're wrong. But he swears that the best Bloody Marys come from potato vodka. He's convinced of this. Now, I have not found that to be the case. Is there the best kind of cocktail that comes from potato aquavit?
I think the Norwegians would say that it's important, but I think you can get... I obviously love this aquavit, but I think you can get good aquavit with all kinds of bases. Okay,
so they put it on a ship, they sail it around. Does the motion of the ocean actually?
It's the motion, and it's the temperature changes that you're getting when you're at sea, so the barrels are contracting and expanding. So it's kind of a way of accelerating that aging process.
So some oysters off the Oregon coast, they put in nets so that their muscles are always working the whole time through the waves.
Okay.
Similar kind of thing to give it more flavor and more, vibrancy. So similar kind of thing.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, when you're all the way up in Norway, if you just put a barrel in a room, its temperature changes aren't going to be that big compared to, say, putting a bourbon in a barrel room in Kentucky or a tequila in Mexico, where there's a lot of heat. It'd be much harder to do that in Norway. So putting it on a ship and letting it experience those temperature changes as it sloshes around in a barrel is a way to get some good aging out of it.
So in some way, to me, this is kind of reminiscent of whiskey almost. I mean, I can imagine a cold night, stepping outside on the back porch and just enjoying this as watch the rain come down.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I love the breadth of varieties that you have in aquavit. You can go from this really strong, assertive, caraway or anise spirit, or you can go to this really gentle, barrel-aged, spirit that you could just sip very easily. And, so no matter what kind of aquavit you're looking for, and if you want something aged or unaged, if you want different spices, there's probably one out there that fits that profile.
Okay, so you are a gifted writer and a successful author, so now I think I know another book for you to write. You could write an aquavit cocktail book, and you could have 4 sections: spring, winter, summer, fall.
I like the idea. If any publishers are listening and want to do it, they should get in touch.
Yeah, contact him, because that would be a great book. And then I just pull out my, okay, here's the aquavits I need to drink in the spring. It's summer. Here's my summer aquavit cocktails. I love it. Because this first one, Brennivin,
yeah,
it almost feels like I could do a gimlet with it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, what kind of cocktails would you do? So now there's different kinds of, it's liney, correct?
Linea.
Linea. There's different kinds of linea aquavits. Which one is this one?
This is the Lysholm Linea.
Lysholm linea?
Yeah, so linea refers to the line, the equator. So if the aquavit travels on the boat and it crosses the equator twice, then it becomes a linea aquavit. And so there are multiple lineas in Norway. Here in the United States, we just think of this as linea because it's the only one that we get. But if you were in Norway, you would say this is Lysholm Linea.
Lysholm linea,
to
okay.
distinguish it from some others.
And what kind of cocktails would you make with this?
This is one I would treat more like a whiskey than like a gin. So it was in that Scotch cocktail that I mentioned at the Whiskey Library. You could certainly use this in the Old Bay Ridge, that old-fashioned like drink that Dave Wondrich made. I've heard there's some interesting ones coming out for this year's Aquavit Week. Revelry in Southeast Portland is talking about doing a matcha tea cocktail with this, so I'm really intrigued to try that.
Wow, that sounds incredible.
Yeah. So it's pretty versatile, so I'm excited to see what people come up with.
All right, I love it. Well, Jacob, it's been awesome having you on the Great Food, Great Stories podcast. I think now I'm created a 4th episode for you to be in. You should come back next year and bring 2 or 3 bartenders with you that have made cocktails for Aquavit. We can drink their cocktails, talk about them, talk about Aquavit Week.
I love it.
All right, so you're going to come back, we'll tell your story. You'll come back sometime, we'll put you on the Portland Beer podcast and talk about your book. And then we'll talk about the distillery scene some point, and then we'll do an Aquavit Week with a couple bartenders.
All right, let's get them on the calendar.
All right, sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been listening to the Great Food, Great Stories podcast on Portland Colony Radio, and I encourage you to check out Aquavit Week. This year's going to be a lot of different places, and the event, I believe, will continue to grow. So go to Aquavit Week, Google it, check out the website, the Twitter, the Facebook page, and find where it is near you. Cheers, everybody.